Good morning, everyone, on this blustery Iowa day. Thank you for attending this IASFAA, Iowa Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators webinar on how to avoid common mistakes on the FAFSA form. I'm going to be the moderator today. I'm Eric Danielson with the Iowa College Access Network and a part of the Professional Development Committee, Community Outreach Committee that is putting on this webinar for you today. So appreciate you all that are in attendance. And this is a webinar that we are going to and are right now recording so that anyone that couldn't attend today can access it later, or if any of you want to share it with anyone else, you'll be able to do that, and we'll get that information out to you. Our presenters today are Susan Collins, the financial aid advisor, at La James International College, and Matt Faldudo, Financial Aid Director at Kirkwood Community College. So we appreciate them coming in and doing this webinar for you today. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If there are questions that you want to ask, we are going to be a smaller group in attendance, so you can certainly raise your hand if you would like to speak the question, and I'm going to be in charge of unmuting and trying to get people to be able to do that. Or there's also a question pane that you have where you can ask questions there, and then I'll interject throughout the presentation. I'll monitor those and can ask Susan or Matt those questions to answer for you if you have them. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Susan and Matt. Thank you both very much for presenting today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric. This is Matt Faldudo, Director of Financial Aid at Kirkwood, and we're really happy to be here to talk a little bit about the FAFSA and how to avoid those common mistakes. I'm going to kick it off, and then Susan will jump in a little bit later in the presentation. As Eric mentioned, we're part of the Iowa Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, and our specific committee is community outreach. And so one of the goals of our committee is to reach out to folks like you about financial aid and get that information out there. So we're really happy to have this opportunity. All right, let's get started. The first thing that I want to talk about is the FAFSA and the fact that the FAFSA is free. It's right there in the name, free application for federal student aid. That's what FAFSA stands for. We always want to make sure our students know that they need to, or that they should fill it out at the official website, FAFSA.gov. There are sites on the internet that charge a fee to do this, but there's no reason to do that. We're here in Iowa. We're very fortunate to have the Iowa College Access Network, which has locations all over Iowa, and those folks will help families fill out the FAFSA for free. And of course, many colleges, most colleges, certainly here at Kirkwood, we will help families fill that out as well. So there's no reason to pay the fee to fill out the free application for federal student aid. All right, let's go on to logging in. It seems this is the first step of the FAFSA, of course, and this is the first possibility where you could head the wrong direction. So we just kind of wanted to emphasize that students, there's a place for students to log in, and if it's a parent, there's a place for them to log in. You can see on this screenshot here, if it's the student, they want to log in with their FSA ID. Do not log in with the FSA ID if they're not the student. The parents, if the parents are there, they can choose that enter student's information on the right side of that screenshot so that they are going in the correct way as a parent. So that's an important first step there. And then let's talk a little bit about the FSA ID. This is the way that the students sign the FAFSA, and it is a really important piece of information that they are going to need throughout their college career if they want to continue to get financial aid. Not only is it used for the FAFSA, but if they have to make corrections to the FAFSA later, they'll need that FSA ID. And it's going to be needed if the student takes out student loans. The FSA ID is what they use to sign the master promissory note. So if they want a loan, they're going to need that. So it's important that they keep that FSA ID and password in a safe place. Another thing we want to always mention to students is they should use a personal email to sign up for the FSA ID, an email that they're going to be able to access over the next several years. We do not recommend that they use their high school email address, so no Jane Doe at coolhighschool.k12.iowa.us. That is not a good plan because they'll lose access to that, or they could lose access to that. So we want them to use an email that is their personal email that they're going to have access to for a while. And then we also suggest that they write down that login and password for that email, keep that in a safe place. Oftentimes, we'll have students not remember what email they signed up for their FSA ID with, or if they remember, they don't remember the password for it. That's an important part of that. If they need to have, if they forget their password for FSA ID, they might need to have that sent to their email, and they need to know what that email is. So it's important that they keep that information. A couple other things with the FSA ID. Parents need an FSA ID too. Parents use their FSA ID to sign the FAFSA, and not signing the FAFSA can absolutely delay the process. So we certainly want parents to get that FSA ID and sign the FAFSA when the students do their FAFSA. All right. And then the next slide that we put out there is really just kind of a suggestion. Create this for your students perhaps, and have them fill this out for their username and their email, password, answer to the security questions, the phone number they use to set this up. Same thing for the parents. It's just kind of a suggestion so that the students have all of that information in one place, and they can have it. They certainly want to keep that safe, of course, but that was just a thought that we had that might help students just to stay organized with that information and make sure they have it when they need it. So let's go on to some common FSA ID mistakes. One thing that happens is sometimes students will enter information that doesn't match the FSA ID information. So when a student creates the FSA ID, their information like name and social security number, date of birth, all of that is sent to the Social Security Administration to be verified. And then if the student enters a different name or SSN or anything on the FAFSA form, they get an error message. And this is often just the result of a typo or mixing up student and parent information. So we just to avoid delays in completing and processing that application, just triple check that information, quadruple check it. Just make sure that the right information is there. We want to make sure that the FSA ID information that they submitted is the same thing that is on that FAFSA. Okay. Another thing that happens is mixing up those FSA IDs. Sometimes, I've seen this a number of times, the student and the parent mix up their FSA IDs, and this is a pretty common error. And it's extremely important for each person to have their own FSA ID, not share that with anyone, and make sure you use the right one for the student and the right one for the parent. All right. So another common FSA ID mistake is when you want to make sure that the FSA ID is matched to the parent on the FAFSA. So on the FAFSA, parents are listed as there's parent 1 and parent 2. And it doesn't matter who's number 1 and who's number 2. The family can work that out for themselves. I'm not going to get into that. But they would want to make sure that if the one who signs the FAFSA, because only one parent has to sign it, make sure that they choose the right parent 1 or parent 2 when they sign it so that it connects. So you don't want to have mom be the one signing it and then have her be parent 2, but you choose parent 1. That would be a mismatch and it won't go. The other thing that happens sometimes, because we know parents like to fill these out for their students, they're at that point, they're 17, 18 years old, but the parents are still seeing them as that kid that they have to do it for them. So oftentimes, we know those parents will fill that out for the students, which of course we don't recommend. We say the students should be filling it out for themselves with the parents' help. But in any case, because we do know that parents often do this, we want to make sure that it's clear to the parent that when the FAFSA form says you or your, it's referring to the student. We've had cases where parents in the past have read that you or your, and they just put their information in that question. And Of course, we want them to put the student's information in there. If the form does ask for parent information, it's going to specify that in the question, so it will be very clear. So that's another one of those common mistakes we see that we just kind of wanted to throw out there for you so that you were aware. And that's my part. I'm going to turn it over to Susan now to talk a little bit about the exciting topic of tax information.
The exciting topic of tax information. Hi, this is Susan Collins. I am a financial aid advisor with LaJanes International College. And tax information, as you know, now the IRS data retrieval tool is back up and running, and that is the best option when completing the tax information portion of the FAFSA for both students and parents. It helps when you've been chosen for verification and a number of things to make sure that the students truly being awarded what they're eligible for. Not everyone can use the tool. The student or parent is married, and either the student, the parent, or their spouse filed married filing separate. They cannot use the IRS data retrieval tool. The student or parent is married and they're filing head of household. The parent's marital status is unmarried and both legal parents are living together. The student or parent filed a Puerto Rican or foreign tax return. And then also student or parents who filed their tax return electronically within the last 3 weeks or through the mail within the last 11 weeks. They might need to enter their tax information manually, as it might not have processed through the IRS's system yet. For individuals who filed, or for married persons who filed jointly, you need to look for different places to get tax information. And so these next couple of slides kind of give you the direction of the 3 different forms that are available and what numbers you would add or subtract to get the number that needs to go on the FAFSA. On the right-hand side of the FAFSA, there's information boxes that actually give you access to this information as well as the students are completing the FAFSA. So in this instance, on a 1040, they would subtract line 46 from line 56, and whatever that total is what would go on the FAFSA. The same for a married person who filed separately from their spouse. You would use the same, these calculations for the total income tax on the different. So if you filed the 1040, if they file different tax returns, sometimes one parent will do a 1040A and the other one can do a 1040EZ. So this kind of goes through the different calculations that you need to do to add or subtract in between the 2 different tax returns to come up with the right information. The next big issue that we see is dependency and what parent information is required. The dependency questions on the FAFSA determine if a student is independent or dependent. Answering yes to just one of the questions that we'll go over in a moment makes a student independent. Even if the student fully supports themselves, pays their own bills, and files their own taxes, they still could be considered a dependent student, and the parent information must be provided. So the questions that get asked is if the student will be 24 or older by December 31st of the school year for which you are applying for financial aid. So their 24th birth year is when they flip to an independent student automatically just based on their age. Will they be working towards a master or doctorate degree? Are they married or separated but not divorced? If a student is divorced, they will flip back to dependent status if they're not able to answer yes to any of the other questions. Do you have children who receive more than half of their support from you? Do you have dependents other than children or a spouse who live with you and receive more than half of their support from you? At any time since you turned age 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care, or were you a ward of the court or dependent of the court? Are you an emancipated minor or in a legal guardianship as determined by a court? Are you an unaccompanied youth who is homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training, or are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? Please keep in mind that answering yes to any of these questions, which would change a student's status to independent, may require supporting documentation so that we can prove that they're eligible for the various different federal student aid based on dependent versus independent. If a student's parents are divorced or separated, this is a huge question that we get. You need to answer the question about the parent he or she lived with more during the last 12 months. If the student didn't live with one parent more than the other, give the answers about who provided more financial support during the past 12 months or during the most recent year that he or she actually received support from a parent. If the biological parents are divorced, but the parent with whom the student lived with more over the last 12 months is remarried, then the student will answer remarried and enter information about the parent and their new spouse. This is another really huge common mistake where they will separate out the income and just list the legal parent. If a parent is legally remarried, you must enter the income and all of the financial information for both the parent and the new spouse. If the biological parents are divorced and only the parent with whom the student lived less or neither is remarried, then the student chooses divorced. So if they listed mom as who there was their support person and she's not gotten remarried, then she would be divorced and list only her income. If the biological parents are divorced and living in the same household, the student must select married or remarried and list both parents' income. If the biological parents were divorced in 2016 and the parent the student lived with was not the one who claimed the student on their taxes, only include the information for the parent that the student lived with more or who provided most of their support. If the parent is remarried, you will use your parent and step-parent information. It's okay if you're not listed as a dependent on their 2016 taxes if they provided more than half of your support.
Hey Susan, this is Eric. There was a question that someone put up, so I wanted to throw that out as you were talking about that. One of the attendees asked, what about a student who was kicked out of the house, then guardianship was changed to be with grandparent? Is he independent or under grandparent?
If there's a legal guardianship, then that they would answer that question yes, because they're in a legal guardianship, even if the legal guardianship changed.
Yeah, and the other thing to add to that is they would never put the legal guardian's information on the FAFSA. It would have to be a biological parent or an adopted parent to have that. So if grandma or grandpa actually adopted the student, then that information would go on the FAFSA, but it has to be a biological or adoptive parent to put any of that information on the FAFSA. And it sounds like based on what you described, that student would be independent. Mm-hmm. We would probably ask for documentation of guardianship in that.
Correct. And that leads into this next slide that I put the link at the bottom of the slide to access this. You actually can print it off. It's very handy to have as it's a roadmap to kind of ask questions, and then depending, kind of get you down to where what parent you're going to use. But at the bottom it also says the following people are not your parent unless they have legally adopted you, which is a widowed step-parent, grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, older brothers or sisters, aunts or uncles. And so I just had a situation where a student was in a foster care situation but got legally adopted, and then that switched. That parent information had to be added because they legally adopted them. Had they not legally adopted them, then they wouldn't have had to answer that information. Parents do have a responsibility towards putting their information on the FAFSA. It doesn't in any way force a parent to provide financial support of a student's education. I get this question all the time, especially with Parent Plus loans. A parent is not required to take out a Parent Plus loan. They're not required to donate to the education fund or paying for that student to get through their programs of choice, but they are required to provide their financial information on the FAFSA to determine a student's eligibility for federal student aid. By not providing the information means the student won't be eligible for grants and subsidized loans. So it really hurts a student if the parent won't provide their information. Parents also need to know that all information that's on the FAFSA can only be viewed by the individuals who have agreed to comply with the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act. You'll hear that called FERPA, which prevents them from sharing private student information. The next common mistake that's made is school codes, not listing school codes for all the schools that you want to attend or that you're interested in attending. In order for a school to receive the FAFSA, the student must enter the school's code on the FAFSA. The student can enter up to 10 school codes. When we get the FAFSAs, we can't see where else you have sent your FAFSA to. It only shows that specific school's code, and all the other ones are hidden. And school codes can be added later. We've added a link to the school search where you can actually click on there and enter the state that you're looking for, and it'll list all the schools that are located in that state. And then you would simply add those to the FAFSA. So here, as it said, so the school year, you'd put 17-18 if they're going to be attending before July 1st, 2018. That'll be the 17-18 award year. If they're planning on attending after July 1st, 2018, that's the 18-19 award year. And then you'll, like this one says Iowa, and then you choose the city for Cedar Rapids, you hit search, and it'll show you that in Cedar Rapids, Capri College, Coe College, Kaplan, and Kirkwood Community College all exist in those areas. There's actually 2 additional schools that don't show on this screen. So you would just click in the box in front of the school and click add, and you can add up to 10 schools to each FAFSA and go back in and change that if as you need. The changes for the 2018-19 are exciting with the IRS data retrieval tool being back. The biggest difference is information is blocked out on the FAFSA. So when they link their taxes, it will just simply show a statement that the taxes have been linked. It will no longer show them the physical information. Only schools can see that information. Anyone who uses the IRS data retrieval tool will receive a letter from the IRS letting them know that it was used. If chosen for verification, taxes must be linked, or the student and parent must obtain the appropriate year's IRS tax transcript. Verification of non-filing is also now required, starting with the 2018-19 award year. For independent students and parents of dependent students who didn't file taxes, you need to please let them know that if they are selected for verification, they will need to provide proof that they didn't file taxes by completing the IRS Form 4506T and checking option 5 to obtain the IRS verification of non-filing letter.
Susan and Matt, we actually have another question that sort of pertains to that IRS data retrieval and going back to what parent information is used on the form. The question was, when you connect to the IRS data retrieval, it brings in the 2016 tax return. But let's say the parents are now divorced, but they had filed a married and joint return in 2016. How do schools determine financial aid since one parent is now gone? Or probably another way to put it, how do you file the FAFSA in that situation now that the parents are divorced, but they actually filed a joint return in 2016?
That's actually going to require a little extra effort on the department, on part of the financial aid office for the school that your student is going to attend. You would still want to link your taxes, but then you're going to have to provide a copy of your taxes and to your financial aid office, and they may require other documentation to provide proof that the other parent is no longer in the household. And then there are some schools can perform what's called professional judgment, and they can look at that information and they can go in and they can change your financial information on your parents to match what your situation is today. Is there something different, Matthew, that you would add to that?
No, that's exactly what we do as well. We would do that special conditions and look at just the one parent's information instead of both. Yep.
But you'll want to still link your taxes so that part is done and correct, and then we would go in and we would correct the information based on the documentation that the student and parent would provide. So obtaining your tax documentation from the IRS is really critical. There are 3 different ways that a student or parent can obtain their tax documentation. I encourage anyone that completes the FAFSA at any time to automatically request their tax documentation in the event that they are chosen for verification. It just kind of speeds up that process for them. Option 1 is to go online, and there is the link. You would choose get transcript online or get transcript by mail and follow the various prompts. You want to make sure that they're using the exact address that was used on the tax form when they filed, otherwise it will not work. But make certain that they order the tax return and select the correct tax return. So for the 2017-18 tax year, it would be 2015, and for the 2018-19 tax year, it's the 2016 return transcript. And it's super important that they are ordering the return transcript, not the account transcript. Option 2 would be to call the 800 number listed there and select option 2 and follow the prompts, again making sure that they order the appropriate tax year. Option 3 is to complete the 4506T in mail or fax to the appropriate IRS office, and we provided the link to the actual form. These forms can be taken, once they're completed, they can be taken into your financial aid offices as well, and they may be able to assist you in getting that faxed in to kind of speed up that process, because it does have to be mailed, and so there's a processing time that takes. Receiving your tax transcript, usually you will get that in the mail within 7 to 10 business days. So here's some of the resources that we've used today: the FAFSA.gov website, and then steps to filling out the FAFSA form, and another link to the Parent's Guide to filling out the FAFSA form. And with that, that actually wraps up our presentation of what we have.
And I'll just add one quick thing at the end there. That blog.ed.gov, we list the two that we used for this presentation, but I strongly encourage people to check out that website, blog.ed.gov. It has lots of great posts about financial aid, you know, how to fill out the FAFSA when you have more than one child in college, and 5 things to do after filing your FAFSA form. It's a really useful blog, so I encourage people to check that out. And I think that does wrap us up, Eric, but you know, we'd be happy to answer any questions folks have if we want to kind of open this up a little bit for any questions anybody has about financial aid in general, FAFSA in specific.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for presenting. I'm just checking it out to see if there are any other questions that do come up here. I'm not seeing any as of yet. If anybody, and also any attendees, if you would like to raise your hand, I can unmute you to speak the question as well. Either one, so I'll give it a couple. And I believe we also wanted to mention, as you see on the screen there for Susan and Matt's information there, if you would like a copy of this PowerPoint, you can email them and they will send you the PowerPoint to you if you would like a copy of this. We are going to, since we are recording it, going to have it available for others to view later, and so you'll get that information on that as well. But we would be happy to send that out to you. You can email either Susan or Matt to get that.
And also, just kind of, oh, sorry, Eric. If you have any questions or anything that you're confused about, please, by all means, pick up the phone, give us a call, email us, and let us know what your questions are. We're more than happy to help you, to answer your questions, to give you direction. That's kind of what we're here for. If we don't know your answer, we will definitely put you on the right track to get the answer or find the answer for you.
And one of the attendees said, thank you, this was very helpful. So Teresa had mentioned that, one of the attendees. So thank you, Teresa, for saying that. And I do not see any other questions now that are happening, but all of you have now Susan and Matt's information. You know, you can contact us at any time, the colleges directly, the financial aid offices would be more than happy to help you out as well, but definitely a lot of places you can go along the ways as you're helping your students through this financial aid process this year. So without seeing any other questions that have popped up now, I think we'll go ahead and stop the broadcast. But one more time, Susan and Matt, thank you very much for presenting this today, and for IASFAA and the Community Outreach Committee for also putting this presentation on. We appreciate that. Everyone, thank you very much for those that attended today. Thank you for attending, and try to stay warm this weekend. We'll talk to you later. Thank you very much.